Ethan's neighborhood was the picture of suburban peace, a charming, quiet cul-de-sac where families enjoyed barbecues. Kids played hopscotch on the sidewalks, and the sound of wind chimes filled the air. At the edge of the neighborhood sat Ethan's pride and joy, a small private farm that had been in his family for generations. Surrounded by a sturdy fence and boasting a vibrant garden, a cozy barn, and a rooster weather vane spinning atop the roof, the farm was a sanctuary from the mundane chaos of city life. But every paradise has its serpent, and in this case, it was Karen. Karen wasn't just any neighbor. She was the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, armed with an iron will, a clipboard, and an uncanny ability to find fault in the tiniest of things. To her, the neighborhood wasn't a community. It was her personal kingdom. Her reign of petty terror had left many in the neighborhood quietly grumbling, but no one dared to openly challenge her. That is, until she turned her sights on Ethan and his farm. It started innocently enough, or as innocently as she could manage. She appeared at Ethan's doorstep one sunny morning, clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield of righteousness. Her tone was polite, but her expression betrayed the storm brewing underneath. "Ethan," she began, her voice dripping with condescension, "I'm sure you're aware of our HOA guidelines. Your fence looks questionable." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Questionable," he repeated, glancing over at the sturdy, well-maintained wooden fence that had stood there long before the HOA even existed. Karen's eyes narrowed as she nodded sharply. "Yes, it doesn't align with the aesthetic standards of the neighborhood." Suppressing a chuckle, Ethan replied, "Karen, it's a fence. It's literally designed to blend in." But Karen was undeterred. "Rules are rules," she said with a tight smile before handing him a neatly typed violation notice. As she walked away, Ethan couldn't help but shake his head, wondering how someone could take offense so personally. Little did he know, this was only the beginning. Karen's clipboard crusade had just started, and Ethan's peaceful farm was about to become ground zero for her latest power trip. Karen's clipboard became a weapon of mass frustration as she ramped up her campaign against Ethan's farm. It seemed like every day a new violation notice appeared in his mailbox, each more absurd than the last. One morning, Ethan found a bright pink slip accusing him of unauthorized vegetation because his sunflowers were taller than the HOA's recommended height. Another day, she cited him for the reflective hazard caused by the rooster weather vane atop his barn. Ethan couldn't decide whether to laugh or cry. Karen didn't stop at notices. She took her patrols to the next level, pacing the edge of Ethan's property with the intensity of a prison warden inspecting for contraband. One occasion, she stood on the sidewalk, hands on her hips, glaring at Ethan's barn like it had insulted her new haircut. When Ethan caught her pointing a laser pointer at his fence, presumably measuring its height, he couldn't contain his disbelief. "Karen, are you serious right now?" he called out, leaning over his porch railing. She turned, clipboard at the ready. "I'm ensuring compliance," she snapped, as though she was single-handedly preserving the sanctity of the neighborhood. Her antics escalated when she began enlisting other HOA members to join her cause. At a hastily arranged HOA meeting, Karen presented a slideshow titled "The Farm Problem," complete with overly dramatic photos of Ethan's property. "This fence," she declared, pointing to an image projected on the wall, "is an eyesore. It disrupts the neighborhood's harmony." Ethan couldn't help but interject, "Karen, it's a wooden fence. It's practically invisible unless you're standing in my yard." Karen shot him a withering glare. "It's the principle of the matter, Ethan. The HOA guidelines are clear, and we all have to follow them." Despite her insistence, the other members were less than enthusiastic about her crusade. A few nodded lightly, but most exchanged amused glances or subtly rolled their eyes. It was clear that Karen's war on Ethan's farm was more about her obsession with control than any real violation of the rules. But Karen wasn't deterred by the lack of support. If anything, it only fueled her determination. She began issuing warnings about potential fines for Ethan's noncompliance and even hinted at escalating the matter to legal action. Her dramatic behavior reached its peak one afternoon when Ethan caught her standing on a stepladder outside his property. attempting to take photos over the fence. "Karen," Ethan shouted, marching toward her. "Get off my ladder," she huffed, climbing down with exaggerated dignity. "I was merely inspecting for potential violations," she said, clutching her clipboard like a badge of honor. Ethan could only shake his head. This wasn't just about a fence or a farm anymore. It was about Karen's insatiable need to wield power, no matter how ridiculous the circumstances. And Ethan was determined to push back, no matter how many pink violation slips she stuffed in his mailbox. Ethan had always considered himself a patient man, but Karen was testing the limits of his restraint. Despite her constant stream of petty complaints and violation notices, he initially tried to approach the situation with reason and logic. One afternoon, clipboard in hand, Karen returned to Ethan's property with yet another complaint. "Ethan," she began, her voice dripping with faint concern, "the color of your barn door is not in line with the HOA's approved palette." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Karen, the barn door is brown. The same brown it's been since before you moved here." Karen pursed her lips. "It's not the right brown," she countered, flipping through a stack of swatches as though she were hosting a Fine seminar Ethan Sieged. "You know what, fine, I'll consider repainting it, maybe neon green." Karen's gasp was so dramatic, it could have earned her an award. "That would be a direct violation of the guidelines," she sputtered, clutching her clipboard tighter. Ethan smirked, knowing he had struck a nerve. From that moment on, Ethan decided to take a subtler approach to push back against Karen's antics. When she left yet another violation notice accusing him of unapproved decorative elements for having a birdhouse in his yard, Ethan responded by hanging 3 more birdhouses, each painted in bright, cheerful colors. When Karen threatened fines for the excessive height of his sunflowers, Ethan hosted a neighborhood sunflower growing contest, inviting the neighbors to compete in growing the tallest plant. The event was a hit, with families gathering in his yard to measure their plants and share laughs. Karen, standing at the edge of the gathering with her arms crossed, could only see that her authority was quietly undermined. Ethan also began collecting evidence of Karen's increasingly absurd behavior. Every time she appeared on his property to inspect his fence or take pictures, he discreetly recorded her on his phone. The footage showed her measuring grass with a ruler, peering through his windows from the sidewalk, and even attempting to photograph his rooster weather vane from a stepladder. But it wasn't just about passive resistance. Ethan also sought support from his neighbors. Over time, he discovered that Karen's antics had impacted nearly everyone in the community. Tom, the guy next door, shared how Karen had issued him a warning because his kids' chalk drawings on the driveway weren't HOA approved. Sarah, a retiree down the street, recounted how Karen had accused her cat of unauthorized trespassing on another neighbor's lawn. The stories were endless, and they all had one thing in common: Karen's obsession with control. Slowly but surely, the neighborhood began to rally behind Ethan. While they didn't confront Karen directly, they showed their support in small ways, attending his sunflower contest, sharing their own stories of Karen's overreach, and laughing at his sarcastic quips about her latest violation notices. Karen, of course, noticed the growing camaraderie among her neighbors, and it only fueled her determination. She began escalating her threats, hinting at legal action and issuing daily notices. But for every ridiculous move she made, Ethan countered with humor, subtle defiance, and unwavering calm. It was a quiet war of wits, and Ethan was determined to win, not just for himself, but for everyone in the neighborhood who had endured Karen's clipboard tyranny. Karen's relentless crusade against Ethan's farm was the talk of the neighborhood, and soon everyone had an opinion. Some saw her as a necessary enforcer of order, while others thought she was taking her role as HOA president way too seriously. Regardless of where they stood, the tension between Ethan and Karen had become a source of entertainment and solidarity for the community. One thing was certain: Karen's antics had become a source of entertainment for everyone around. Tom, Ethan's next-door neighbor, was the first away in one evening as Ethan was watering his garden. Tom leaned over the fence and chuckled. "Heard Karen at it again. What is it this time? Your scarecrow is too intimidating." Ethan laughed, shaking his head. "Close," She says my fence is disrupting the aesthetic flow. Tom snorted. Aesthetic flow? This isn't an art gallery. It's a neighborhood. As Karen's obsession grew, so did the stories from other neighbors. Sarah, the retired teacher who lived 2 houses down, shared her own run-in with Karen. She fined me last year for having a bird feeder, she said. She said it attracted undesirable wildlife. Can you believe that? She said, sipping her tea. I told her the only wildlife around here was her attitude. Then there was Rachel, a young mom whose kids loved to draw with chalk on their driveway. Karen actually knocked on my door to tell me their drawings weren't up to community standards, Rachel said, rolling her eyes. They are kids, Karen, not muralists. Despite Karen's attempts to maintain control, the neighborhood began quietly uniting behind Ethan. It started with small acts of rebellion. Tom left his grass uncut for a week longer than usual just to see if Karen would say something. Sarah added a second bird feeder to her yard, daring Karen to send another notice. Rachel's kids, sensing the tension, started drawing extra chalk pictures that included a cartoon version of Karen holding her clipboard. Word of Ethan's subtle retaliation, like the sunflower contest, spread quickly, and neighbors began stopping by his farm to lend their support. Ethan noticed how their shared frustration with Karen brought them closer together. At one point, during an impromptu barbecue Ethan hosted on his farm, the stories reached a peak of hilarity. Tom recounted how Karen once tried to measure the exact distance between his trash cans and the curb. Sarah revealed that Karen had taken it upon herself to inspect her flower beds for non-compliant blooms. Laughter erupted as Rachel shared the infamous tale of Karen filing a formal complaint about a stray cat trespassing on someone's lawn. Not everyone was on Ethan's side, though. A few neighbors, Karen's loyalists, whispered among themselves at the barbecue, shaking their heads disapprovingly. Rules are rules, one of them muttered. If Ethan just followed them, Karen wouldn't have to step in. But the majority of the community seemed to agree that Karen had crossed the line. The once divided neighborhood was now a mix of quiet defiance and growing solidarity, all centered around Ethan's farm. It wasn't just about fences or sunflowers anymore. It was about standing up to Karen's unreasonable behavior and reclaiming the peace they had all once enjoyed. Karen, of course, noticed the subtle shift in the neighborhood dynamics. She glared at the increasing number of neighbors who visited. Ethan's farm grew more frustrated by the lack of compliance with her every decree. Her clipboard became her constant companion. As if she could use it to regain the control she felt slipping through her fingers. But the more she tightened her grip, the more the neighborhood resisted. Ethan's farm became a symbol of quiet rebellion, a rallying point for everyone fed up with Karen's reign of HOA tyranny. The stage was set for the conflict to escalate further, with the entire community now playing a part in the drama. Karen's escalating antics reached a new level of absurdity as she realized she was losing her grip on the neighborhood. Determined to reassert her authority, she turned her full attention to Ethan's farm, ramping up her efforts to impose her will. But Ethan, with the support of his neighbors and a growing arsenal of evidence, was ready to fight back. One morning, Ethan woke up to find Karen trespassing on his property again. This time, she was armed with a measuring tape and a clipboard, furiously scribbling notes as she inspected the height of his fence. Ethan, already accustomed to her antics, grabbed his phone and began recording Karen. He called out, approaching her, "What are you doing on my property?" Karen whirled around, clutching her clipboard as if it were a shield. "I'm ensuring compliance with HOA guidelines," she snapped. Ethan smirked, holding up his phone. "You're trespassing, and I'm recording this." Karen's face turned red, but she quickly regained her composure. "This is necessary for the integrity of the neighborhood," she declared before storming off, muttering under her breath about ungrateful residents. Ethan decided it was time to take action. He reviewed the HOA bylaws and realized Karen had been blatantly overstepping her authority. Armed with his recordings, violation notices, and testimonies from other neighbors, he prepared for the next HOA meeting, a meeting that would ultimately determine Karen's fate. The meeting was packed. Word had spread about Karen's behavior, and nearly every resident showed up, eager to see what would unfold. Karen, as usual, was prepared with her infamous binder of complaints, which she dramatically slammed onto the table. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her tone dripping with authority, "the state of our neighborhood is at risk. Certain individuals," she glanced pointedly at Ethan, "are blatantly disregarding our community standards." Ethan stood up, calm and composed. "If by community standards you mean your personal vendettas, then yes, I suppose I am." The room chuckled, and Karen's glare sharpened. Ethan began presenting his case. He played video clips of Karen trespassing on his property, measuring his grass, and taking pictures over his fence. He read aloud the ridiculous violation notices she had issued and highlighted how many of them had no basis in the HOA's official guidelines. Finally, he called on his neighbors to share their experiences. Tom was the first to speak. "She fined me, leaving my trash cans out 5 minutes after pickup." 5 minutes, he exclaimed, shaking his head. Sarah added, "She said my bird feeder attracted undesirable wildlife. Last I checked, cardinals and blue jays weren't a threat to the neighborhood." Rachel chimed in. She complained about my kids' chalk drawings. "They're kids, not graffiti artists." The room erupted in laughter and murmurs of agreement as one by one the neighbors shared their stories. Karen's face grew redder with each testimony, but she tried to maintain her composure, insisting she was only enforcing the rules. When it was Ethan's turn again, he delivered the final blow. "According to the HOA bylaws," he said, holding up the document, "Karen has not only overstepped her authority, but has also violated multiple rules herself, including trespassing, harassment, and misuse of HOA funds for personal grievances." Gasps filled the room. Karen tried to interject, but the evidence was overwhelming. The HOA board members, who had remained silent until now, exchanged glances and nodded. Based on the evidence presented, one of them said, "It's clear that Karen has been acting outside her authority." Effective immediately, Karen is removed as HOA president. The room erupted into applause and cheers. Karen, speechless for the first time, grabbed her clipboard and stormed out of the meeting, her reign of tyranny officially over. But the poetic justice didn't end there. A week later, Karen received her own violation notice for her overly bright, non-compliant holiday decorations. The irony wasn't lost on the neighbors, who celebrated her downfall with a block party on Ethan's farm. As Ethan stood among his neighbors, watching the children play and the community laugh together, he couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Karen's reign was over, and the neighborhood could finally return to the peaceful, welcoming place it was meant to be. With Karen officially dethroned as HOA president, the neighborhood collectively exhaled a sigh of relief. Her absence was palpable, and for the first time in years, the cul-de-sac felt lighter, freer. But karma, as they say, has a way of delivering poetic justice, and Karen's downfall was far from over. It started with the very HOA rules she had weaponized against everyone else. A week after the fateful meeting, Karen received an official notice from the new HOA president, Tom. As one of his first acts in office, Tom had conducted a thorough review of Karen's property, applying the same scrutiny she had inflicted on others. The verdict? Karen was in violation of multiple HOA guidelines. Her offenses range from the unapproved bright pink flamingos scattered across her lawn to the string of blinding holiday lights she had draped over her house well before the HOA-approved holiday decorating period. The most ironic violation, however, was her fence, which had been 2 inches taller than regulations allowed. When the notice landed on her doorstep, Karen was livid. She stormed over to Tom. House clutching the letter, "This is outrageous," she bared, waving the paper in his face. Tom, calm and composed, replied, "Rules are rules, Karen. Surely you understand." The smoke on his face was subtle but unmistakable. But the real satisfaction came from a neighborhood's response in the days following her demotion. The neighbors came together in ways Karen could never have anticipated. Ethan's farm became the unofficial hub for community gatherings. Families hosted barbecues, kids played games in the open fields, and neighbors bonded over shared stories of Karen's antics. Ethan, ever the gracious host, decided to throw a celebration, a symbolic freedom party. The event was attended by nearly every household, and the mood was jubilant. Tom delivered a short, humorous speech thanking Ethan for standing up to Karen and bringing the neighborhood together. The highlight of the evening came when Sarah, the retired teacher, unveiled a surprise. She had commissioned a large sunflower-shaped plaque with the words, "In honor of Ethan, defender of the neighborhood." The crowd cheered as Ethan accepted the plaque, a lighthearted reminder of how far they had come. Meanwhile, Karen's presence in the neighborhood dwindled. She rarely left her house except to glare at the joyful gatherings taking place on Ethan's farm. Rumors swirled that she was planning to sell her home, unable to endure the embarrassment of her dethroning and the camaraderie that had blossomed in her absence. And one day she did. A moving truck appeared in front of her house, and within hours, Karen was gone. The neighborhood didn't waste any time. That evening, a group of neighbors hung cheerful decorations along the street and held an impromptu gathering to celebrate. The air felt lighter, and the neighborhood at long last felt like home again. Ethan stood on his porch, watching as the neighbors laughed and mingled. Tom raised a glass in his direction. To Ethan, he said loudly, "For reminding us all that even the most stubborn clipboard can't ruin a good neighborhood." The crowd roared with laughter and applause. Ethan couldn't help but smile. Karen was gone. The farm stood tall, and the neighborhood was united like never before. It was a victory for everyone and a reminder that sometimes the best way to handle a Karen is to let karma do the heavy lifting. As the sun set and the party continued, Ethan leaned back in his chair, content. The grass grew freely, the fences stood proudly, and the community thrived. Life in the cul-de-sac was peaceful once more, and for that, Ethan couldn't be happier. If you love this story and found it entertaining, don't forget to like this video to show your support and help more people enjoy the tale of Karen's epic downfall. Subscribe to our channel for more engaging, hilarious, and satisfying stories like this one. Share this video with friends, family, or anyone who's had their own Karen moment in their life. They'll surely relate. Comment below and tell us your favorite part of the story, or share your own experiences with HOA drama. We'd love to hear from you. Hit the notification bell so you never miss another outrageous or heartwarming story. Thanks for being part of our community. See you in the next one.